So you're building a Framer site and you come across forms, but you're slightly confused about how they work. Now, in this video, you're learning everything about them. I'll show you how to start building forms, how to add different types of input fields, how to send submissions to different locations, as well as how to create customized success screens. So if you want to build contact forms, applications, or waitlists, make sure to stick around and watch the full video. My name is Nandi. This is Framer University, and let's get started. So here we are in Framer, and we don't really have a form on our canvas. So the first question is, how do we get a form on the canvas? Well, first of all, we have to press I on our keyboard. This will open this insert panel on the left. By the way, if you don't like shortcuts, you can also just hover on the top bar and just click insert. Now here in the search bar, we're gonna just type in form builder, and there you go, we have the form builder on the top. We can just drag and drop this onto the canvas. And there we have our form now on the website. We can also just go into preview with Command P, or again, if you don't like shortcuts, you can just click here on this little play button. And now we have this form on our website that we can fill out and do anything with it. So let's see first of all how we can add new fields to this form. Well, if you select the form field, you can also see that on the left layers panel, it has a little bit different icon, like a little square with like 2 lines in it, and it also says form. So if you select this, you're gonna have a little plus button on the bottom of it, so you can click that to add different types of fields. So we have text, checkbox, radio, and select. So text is the regular text field that you see on the top for name and email. However, when you have a text-based field, you have to make sure to select the correct type for it on the right panel. So for example, when you have a name, it's just going to be a simple text field, as you can see. However, if we have it for an email, we have to make sure that we select type email. Now we have this for number, phone number, URL, date, time, and we have a bunch of different types here. Just make sure to always choose the correct one for your specific field. And then we have 3 other types here. We have checkbox. Let's add a checkbox here. As you can see, this is just a checkbox that you can tick like this. And we also have radio. So I don't know if you know the difference between radio and checkbox. Basically, when it comes to a radio group, it's usually like grouped together, and you can only select one from the list. So we have different options, and we can select one. We can also group, checkboxes together, but that would mean that we can select all of them, or just select one of them, or none. When it comes to radio, you have to select one, at least one, and only one. So that's basically it. If you click this plus button again to reveal these other types of fields, we also have select, which is the last type. This is basically what we see right here. This is essentially a drop down. So on the right panel, we can add different options that we'll see when we click it in the drop down. And yeah, the user will be able to select from one of those options. So yeah, these are different types of fields that we can add to our form. And let's now take a quick look at the structure on the left layers panel of how these different form input fields are like structured. You can see that we have the big like form container that contains all the different fields, and then we have these labels within. So you can see that each of our fields are within this label. This is really important. Even if you add a new field to your form, you have to make sure that it is within a label. So this label holds the input and then the name. The name is basically the name of that specific field. So in this case, it's name because it's a name field, but in this case, it's going to be email. And again, it's pretty important to make sure that they're always wrapped in this label, because it's going to get a label accessibility tag. I don't want to complicate it even more for you, like with HTML tags and more technical terms. Just make sure that you pay attention to having these wrapped and structured like this, what you see in the example. Now, if we select one of these inputs, so you can see that even when we have this checkbox, it is also going to have a little checkbox. For text inputs, we're going to have input. For a select or a drop down, we're going to have select. For checkbox, checkbox, and for radio, it's going to be radio. And when we select one of these, we're going to always find an input section on the right panel where we can set up the behavior of this input. So for example, when it comes to text-based field, we can set, all sorts of different things here. So if you click this little plus button, you can add a bunch of different properties. So most of these are pretty self-explanatory. Some of these are only applicable when you have a number-based type here. So for example, min and max, that will be applicable for a number-based field or step as well. But I'm going to talk about a few of these just to make sure you understand them. So for example, value allows you to add a value to this field by default. So for example, I can type in Nandi, and so when I land on this page, this field already has Nandi typed in. I can delete this if I want to, but when I reload, it's just going to be there already pre-filled for us. You could ask Nandi, why would I want to set a value by default for a field? I'm not really going to know what's the name of the person who's filling this out. And yeah, you're right. We're not really using value for these visible fields. It's usually used for hidden fields. So what you can, for example, do is you can copy this input. I'm going to press Command C on my keyboard, and I'm going to just paste it within the form. In this case, we don't have to wrap it in a label. It's not needed. We're just going to put it here at the end. And we're going to name this, page. Let's just call it page. So the name of this input will be page. When the user sends it in and we receive an email, we're going to see page and then the value that they typed in. However, if we set a value here and we say about page, then when we land on this form or on this page, it is going to have a prefill with about page. Now, the next thing that we can do is we can add a little property here, which is called hidden. And we can completely hide this input field with this hidden. However, it is still going to be a part of the submitted fields. So essentially, the user doesn't know that we placed a secret field in the form that gives us additional information about the form. In this case, it is going to tell us that this form was submitted on the about page. Maybe this is a form that you have on all of your pages and you set the value on each page to the name of the page, but you can use this in all sorts of creative ways. So yeah, basically that's it. The rest of these properties are pretty self-explanatory. However, I want to dedicate a little more time to the radio buttons here, because as we already talked about it, these are usually wrapped in like little groups, and we can only select one from that defined group. Let's say you want to add another group here, radio 2. We're going to see a little problem because I cannot select one from this group and then one from this group, because this thinks that this whole thing is one group. So what you have to pay attention to when you have multiple radio groups is that the way you group these together is not really with frames, because now we can see that we have two separate containers for this, but Framer doesn't really know that. We can group them by naming them correctly. As you can see, these radio buttons here on the top all have the name radio. And then on the bottom, these also have the name radio. So the trick is to make sure that you name the radio 2 group something else. So maybe we can name it radio 2. So now it is going to know that, okay, we have one radio group on the top. We can select one from these, and then we can also select one from these. When we select one of these input fields, we not only have the input section on the right panel, but we also have styles. So basically here we can, set up how this field will look like. So we can set a color, which is basically how the text will look when it's typed in. So if we set it to white, it's gonna now have white color. By default, it's kind of like a gray color. If we set it to white, it's gonna be nice and white once we start typing in. And you can also set the placeholder text color. Maybe it's gonna be a little bit darker. We can also set a fill color. We can also change the border, and we can also set the focus state here, which is really cool. By default, it's a border, but I don't really like that it's within, as you can see, within the field itself. What I usually like doing is adding shadow. So we can add a shadow, 0 on the Y, 0 blur, and 2 spread. Fully black, or basically just making sure that it matches the background color. And then what I do is I add another shadow layer, which is going to be same Y0, blur 0, and then the spread here is 3, so it's going to be a little bit larger, and then this is going to be accent. So now you can see that we are putting the focus state around the field instead of within the field. So yeah, I think this looks a little better. But now you can see that we only customized the first field right here. How do I make sure that I bring this over to my email, for example? Well, I can just right click here, copy style. There's also shortcut Option, Command and C. And then here I can either press Option, Command and V, or right click and paste style. And now you can see that this is also going to have the same styling. If you take a look at this checkbox, for example, we have the same like styles panel here. We can change the fill color, and now it will have focus state and also checked state, where we can upload a different icon, change the color. It's again pretty self-explanatory. Now let's talk about the submit button, because you see that we have a little submit button here. So if you double click into this component, you're going to see that it has a bunch of different variants. And yes, when you create a form, you have to have a button that has all of these different states. Because for example, when you click submit, the form might start loading, which needs a loading variant, or it might be disabled, the button, you might not be able to click it. You also have a success state, so when the form is successfully submitted, then you have to show a success message, and that's the success variant. And maybe something goes wrong and you cannot send it in, you have to show an error message in that case. So as you can see, we have this button with all of these variants, and then here within the form, we get this form state section on the right panel, where we can assign the loading, success, and all of these different states to the correct variant. So for example, if I add error, I can set the variant to error. So when the form goes into error state, the variant of the button switches to the error variant. So let's do a quick test. But before we can do that, because let me just show you, if I just do this, like I type in something here and I click submit, nothing really happens. And this is a big problem. The reason for this is because we don't really have a send to property set up on the right panel, which basically means it's not sending anywhere at the moment. So we have to tell this form where should the information go to, where the submissions are going. So I'm going to click the form on the left. So again, this little square with 2 lines, form selected, on the right send to, and you can see we have 3 different options: email, webhook, or Google Sheets. Email just sends it to your email address. Webhook, it's used for integrating with different tools like HubSpot or MailChimp, and Google Sheets just puts all the submissions in a Google Sheet, so it just lists it in a really nice and structured way. So for example, if this is a contact field, it's better to use an email, I think. Just sends you an email and you can reply back to the customer, for example. If you are collecting waitlist subscribers or just emails, you can just put them in Google Sheets, and then you can export them from Google Sheets and put it into your email tool or whatever. If you're using a specific tool that you want to integrate with, you have to use Webhooks. And for that, you're going to find a full tutorial down in the description. If you want to integrate with Webhooks, you can check that video. So now, just for an example, I'm going to use email, and I'm not going to send to my email because I don't want to get all these submissions. So we're going to sent to a person that has this email address for some reason. We're going to go into preview, and now let's try sending this form in. Boom, submit. And as you can see, we saw that little loading for a second and then the thank you message since we successfully submitted this form. Now I want to talk about something here because it's not really going to be great if we have this success state. I don't really like this. I think it's too simple. Like, we submitted it, we still see all the fields, and we just see this little thank you here. I want to define a custom success state here. But before I do that, I want to show you what happens if I replace this button with my own button. Because what if I want to design my own button component here? So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to go to assets, and I'm going to just drag and drop my submit component here. And let's see what happens. I click submit and nothing really happens. And the problem is that you can see that if I select this button, on the right panel I no longer have those form state buttons. So the problem is that technically this button here is not connected to the form as a submit button. In order to do that, we have to right click it and click set submit button on the top. So now this form will know that, okay, I need to submit myself when this is clicked. And now we get the form state properties here on the right. So you can see this is basically the same thing. It has the same variance, this button, just a little bit different colors and style. So I can just set it up here. Loading is loading, success is success. And if I go into preview and fill it out again, you're going to see that we have the loading and then the thank you message right here. But now that we know all this, we know how to add different fields to our form, we know how to set up the send to properties so we are actually getting the submissions, and we also know how to replace our button and successfully set it as the form submit button. Let me show you how we can create a much nicer success screen for your forms. So in order to do that, you have to turn this form into a component. So I'm going to right click and create a component here. We're going to call it example form. And now once we have this, we are going to remove the form states from this button because we're no longer setting the form state automatically by adding them here on the button, but we're going to set it like specifically on different variants that we're about to create. So the variant one is going to be called default. And basically that's all we have to do here. Now we can create another variant which is going to be called loading, where we switch the button to the loading variant. And then we're going to create another variant which is going to be called success, and this is where we can set up our success state. Before I do that, I just want to make sure that we have a nice background color here so we have a little bit more of an accurate preview of what we would see on the website. So I'm going to add black background, and then on the primary, I'm going to already design the success screen that we're going to see. So it's nicely waiting here already on the primary to then later come in on the success variant. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to press T on my keyboard, click somewhere here on the canvas and just write thanks for your or maybe just you are on the list. Maybe it's like a, I don't know, waitlist or whatever. I'm going to make this size 18, so it's a little bit larger. We're going to make this semi-bold. We can also add open type, enable some of these alternates to make it look a little bit better, I guess. And once we have that, I'm going to also add variable 24 optical, and I'm not really getting a preview here. Okay, now it's good. So maybe it is going to be 600. Great, so we can put this within this form. As you can see, it's right here, and I can duplicate this and I can write something else here. So you are going to soon start getting emails. I can set this to fill. I can set the other one to fill a bit as well, so they are nicely breaking into two lines. We can select both of them and set the alignment to the center. And then maybe this text on the bottom will be slightly smaller, maybe 14. and we can break it into 2 lines somewhere here. I'm going to also change the color of this second line a little bit to a darker tone, and then we're going to also change the weight to maybe 500. Not 100, that's really thin. 500 is going to be enough for us. So I'm going to then wrap both of these texts in the same like group or frame by selecting them and adding a stack after right clicking. I can set the gap here to a specific value, what we like. I think 10 is going to be okay. And then we're gonna maybe add a little icon. So if we press I on our keyboard, or again go to the left insert panel, we can hover over icons and then just drag and drop the phosphor icon pack on the canvas. I can drag it here inside of the stack that we created for these 2 text layers. I can move it to the top with my arrow keys, and then change the color of the icon on the right to white, and set alpha to 1 to make it fill. So now you can see that it has fill color. If alpha is 0, it doesn't have fill color. So I think I'm gonna just use celebrate. I don't know why we don't have a celebration icon. Oh, okay, it's called confetti, sorry. Okay, we need confetti because we celebrate with confetti. So that's basically it. Now we have the icon as well on top. Maybe we can wrap the texts, these 2 text layers again in a stack. I'm going to use the shortcut for it now instead of right clicking and clicking add stack. I do this because then I can change the spacing separately between the text layers, and then between the text, the 2, like the text block and the icon on top of them. So maybe here I want to have a little bit more space. And basically that's it. Maybe here I'm going to change it to a little bit smaller space. And yeah, I'm not going to tweak it any longer. So I'm going to change this stack. I'm going to call this success. And I'm going to change this to absolute position. So it's not part of the flow, and I can just position it to the center of this form field by pressing Option H and Option V on my keyboard. And then I'm going to prepare it for the animation of how it's going to come in. So I want this to come in from a scaled down version, and I want it to scale in from that position, and also it is going to have 0 opacity eventually. So let's first just add the scale, 0.8 maybe, and then set the opacity to 0. I'm going to also set the style pointer events and user select to none, so we cannot really select it, because even though we cannot see it, it's still there technically because only the opacity is 0, so we could select the text and stuff. That wouldn't really be great. So now I'm going to also group these labels and the submit button in a stack with Option, Command and Enter. I'm going to set their gap back to 20, and we're going to call this form fields. Great, so now we have 2 groups here. One of the groups is called success, and then the other is form fields. So now on the success, I can create the success state. The form fields will animate out, so opacity will drop and it will scale up. So scale is going to be 1.1, then opacity is going to drop down to 0, and we're going to add user select none and pointer events none, so we can no longer click these elements. And then the success will go to opacity 1 and scale 1, so it nicely scales in. And we can maybe set the pointer back to auto and the user select as well, so we can select the text here if we want to. And basically that's it. We have successfully created 3 variants for 3 states of the form. We can also add more for error and stuff like that if we want to. But now we have to somehow connect these together to make sure that indeed when we are loading, we are on the loading variant, and then we successfully sent it in, we're on the success state. So we have to select this first primary variant, and with this little connector on the right side, connect it to the loading, and we can just select on loading. So when the form is loading, it is going to automatically transition onto the loading variant, and from the loading, it is going to go to the success on success. And that's basically it. Now if we go back to the home, preview this, type in our name and email, and then maybe check this right here. Click submit, starts loading, and then we transition over to the success screen. And yeah, it's, I think, much nicer compared to seeing all the form fields still and everything. We just hide the form fields, the submit button, and we just show a nice little success screen right here. On top of this, what I actually forgot to say is that if you don't want to design this custom success screen, you also have the option to set up a redirect here. So if you select your form field where you set up the center property, you can also change or set a redirect URL here. So maybe you want to go to a different page on your website. Maybe you create a /success page where you, I don't know, have really specific content. So yeah, basically that's it. I really hope that it was helpful and you learned something from this video. If you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comments. So if you're building your forms on your Framer sites and you run into an issue, make sure to ask in the comments. I'm going to do my best to answer you guys. And yeah, check out also framer.university because I have a bunch of other tutorials and resources on that website. You can freely remix everything, like free components, scroll animations, and a bunch of helpful stuff. So if you're learning Framer or just using it to create websites for your clients or whatever, it's probably going to be a great resource for you. So that's it for this video. Make sure to like it, subscribe for more, and I'm going to see you in the next one.